Hello and welcome. I'm Fahd Husain. Today, the story has taken a twist. We were all expecting talks between Iran and the United States to start in Islamabad shortly. It was announced that the American delegation would be coming to Islamabad Monday evening and start negotiations with the Iranians probably on Tuesday. But then something happened which has now cast a shadow over this process. The American Navy intercepted an Iranian ship, took it over, and as a result of which Iran this morning announced that they would not speak with the US because they do not trust the US at all. Of course, this comes in the wake of US President Donald Trump issuing some very inflammatory and aggressive statements against Iran on the eve of talks, which caught many by surprise. So the bigger question today is, where do things go from here? Pakistan, of course, as the host of these talks, is doing everything in its power to try and convince the two sides to resume talks so that we can find some off-ramp and get an end to the conflict. What should the Americans do? What should the Iranians do? What can happen? Can the talks start again? These are the big questions that we are going to discuss in our first segment. And to talk about all of these, I'm joined by Mr. Mohammad Amirsi. He is a member of the Global Advisory Council of the Wilson Center and keeps a very close eye on Iran and this region. Mr. Amirsi, thank you for joining us and welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here and following such august speakers that you have previously invited. So thank you.
Right. So now you know what the situation is. What do you see happening, Mr. Amirsi? Do you think that this whole process, which has been so painstakingly built for the last couple of weeks, is now fracturing or is in the danger of being broken? Or are these moves by both sides just prior to negotiations?
Let me make 2 or 3 points. I come from the world of business, and what you are seeing play out here is exactly the same that you would find in any difficult negotiations, especially one where the counterparties have had a hostile attitude towards each other for the best part of 40 plus years. So this is not a surprise. I think that the expectations were very high first time round. I saw many comments that said after 22 hours or 21 hours of discussions, why was a deal not done? And I tweeted and said it's naive to expect that people that have been fighting for 40 years are going to find resolution on everything in 21 years. To me, the Pakistani effort was amazing. The work done by your General Asim Munir and your Prime Minister has been phenomenal. Previously, as you know, everybody has tried. The Omanis tried, the Turks tried, the Europeans tried, and all largely failed. And this is historic because it's the first time that you had the Vice President of the United States meeting his counterpart from Iran face to face without any handholders or chaperones. So I really applaud Pakistan for achieving this. What happened in the first round was very important because it laid some very important framework for now what happens today. And what happens today or tomorrow or next week is largely now what one might expect negotiating posturing, i.e. people test each other to see who has the better leverage, who needs the talks, who needs the resolution more than the other. And in all of this, it's not uncommon from time to time for parties to up the ante, as we say. And we have to be very, very careful to separate questions of form from questions of substance. And if these are mature negotiators, which I believe that on the Iranian side they should learn how to set aside questions of form and focus on substance. Now, the only awkward substance here is the one you pointed out, which is the U.S. onboarding a Iranian vessel and taking control control of it, or rather Trump said we blasted a hole in it. I don't really know all the details. And this could be seen by some people in Iran as an act of bad faith rather than just pure negotiating posture. On the other hand, Iran, were told that the Iranian ships in the vicinity would be subjected to the blockade. The blockade is an issue that was supposed to be resolved after dialogue. So there is, I would say, blame to some degree on both sides. Now, I am hoping if the agenda in the US is that this is nothing more than a cosmetic, optical discussion, and that they want to be able to tick a box and tell the MAGA people that we went the extra mile to get something done, then what you are seeing is nothing more than optics and cosmetics, and nothing will be done. Supporting that is the massive naval and air force buildup in the Gulf that continues. So Iran, having had so many failed attempts, I was involved in the one that took place earlier this year in talking to both parties, one directly, one indirectly. Last year I was involved. I was in in Rome, when the Italians negotiated or put together a forum. I was in Oman as well. And you can see there is significant mistrust by the Iranians of the United States. So this is where we are.
Okay,
I'm hoping that if the will is there, there will be a deal to be done.
Now, the issue is, Mr. Mercy, of course, based on your experience, as you said, that you've also been involved in so many of these negotiations. The problem that I'm seeing is the shortage of time, because the situation that we have now is that the American president has doubled down on the naval blockade. He said twice that he will keep the naval blockade till the time that an actual deal is done. As a result of which the Iranian side has today said categorically that as long as the naval blockade is there, they're not interested in talking. Now, these are two positions which are quite far from each other. And the deadline for the ceasefire is about to end. It's little more than 24 hours, maybe 36 hours to go. So what I'm trying to figure out is, even if this is posturing, as you're saying, somebody has to blink, something has to happen before the ceasefire deadline runs out. So how do you see this clock deciding the next course of action?
So look, for me, it's very, very simple. There is a very easy compromise to be built here. Very easy, okay? I think that the Iranian demand for the blockade to be lifted before they sit on the table, I think they need to rethink that. And if they are listening to this podcast, which I hope they will be, they are, then they should take that very seriously. It is not that important for the blockade to be lifted now. They should come to Pakistan. They should have a meeting with the US side. And I'm told reliably that the parties were working towards a 5-page memorandum of understanding. And while this MOU is being prepared, if the US feel they want to show power by having a blockade for another 24 or 48 hours beyond the expiration of the ceasefire, what's going to change? Nothing. So do the MOU, and then in the MOU, there will be a pathway to getting the final deal done. Once the MOU is signed, there is no basis for the Americans to impose any blockade while the final negotiations are happening, which could take up to 2 months because there are too many detailed points that need to be resolved. That's the compromise, where you allow for this to continue until parties sit at the table and get an MOU done. Okay, it's another 3 days away. And the Pakistanis are very skilled at this. I'm sure that the MOU drafts that have been already prepared, there will not be too much talk needed because it's only an MOU, okay?
I would agree with you, because I think that is the best course of action, Mr. Mercy. I think we need both sides to be here, and I think the hard work put in by Pakistani leadership to try and bring both sides closer to each other was and most likely is paying dividends. As you also know that Field Marshal Asim Munir was in Tehran for a number of days, And the fact that the US president decided to send his senior negotiators to Pakistan, led by the vice president, means that the American president was communicated the message that the Iranians are willing to meet him halfway, roughly speaking. So clearly there was enough progress for him to send people to Islamabad. Now, of course, Iranians, as you were saying, it is in their interest also, because this is an opportunity which should not be missed. And so much work has actually gone into it. Do you think that if things don't change as of today, Iranians can be convinced to come to Islamabad, maybe tomorrow, maybe soon? What will convince them?
Okay, so there are a couple of points here. The travel of Witkoff and Kushner was confirmed. The travel of J.D. Vance was not confirmed. And so that needs to be confirmed, because if it is only Kushner and Witkoff, and if I'm in the Iranian side, I would say that this is not serious. We've been with these two people before, and largely that it has failed, because look, neither of these people are members of the administration. If they were the Secretary of State for Marco Rubio or Secretary of Defense, then at least you know that they are members of the administration. Here, one is a son-in-law and one is a best friend, golf buddy. So there is a bit of skepticism in Iran as to whether finally these two people are able to deliver a deal. If the vice president was coming, then my advice to Iran will be, please come. The problem with the Iranians is, and I know them reasonably well for the years, all of them for the last 10 years, even those that negotiated the JPOA, they do not know when to stop negotiating. And I have told them that they need to take their win and build on it, build trust, because a lot of things can change. This is a process. You cannot expect a 500-page deal to be signed after 40 years of hostility. It will not happen. There is need to be trust building. So take the win now. So far, things have worked out for you, and build on it.
That's an excellent point, Mr. Amarsi. You're actually the second senior person who's actually saying the same point here on this show, that Iranians are tough negotiators, but sometimes they don't know when to clinch the deal. The moment passes. But also feeding into that.
And let me make one more point.
Sure.
And there is a disconnect, okay? So you have an Iranian delegation that is extremely experienced, years of experience in diplomacy, in the Foreign Office, Foreign Services. They're all distinguished diplomats. I know all of them, or most of them that are there. On the other side, you do not have diplomats. You have two business people. On the Iranian negotiating team, there is no business person who understands the psychology of the US people. And so they are talking largely at cross purposes sometimes. And so I think that Iranians have to be staffed with people who are deal makers, who understand the psychology and mindset of their counterparts. And on the American side, you need a little bit more substance on the diplomatic side. Then at least you've got people speaking the same language.
Which is an interesting point, but perhaps given the shortage of time, I don't think the Americans are going to change their team. But the fact is, I think the point that you're making, this was also evident in Geneva, where I think the Iranians gave the Americans a good deal, and I think they missed it. Now there's a second chance coming. How much of a problem is this internal disagreement within the Iranian power structure? Because, the reason I'm asking is because only a few days ago, the Iranian foreign minister announced that the Strait of Hormuz was open. And then he got criticized by people from within. And then ultimately that order was overturned. So this problem of internal disagreement, how serious is that?
So there are two schools of thought, okay? One school of thought, which I subscribe to, talk about that it is always in a negotiating team, people play the good cop, bad cop game to see if they can extract any further mileage. That's the subscription, that's what I subscribe to. There is another view which mainstream media parades to say that this is a fracture in Iranian leadership, It's really the people with the guns and the boats that are in charge, and people that smile with a suit have no real power. I don't think that is the case. I think that they are very aligned, especially now after all the people that have been assassinated, from the supreme leader down to Larijani to Kharazi. These are senior people. And if that does not bring the Iranians together, I'm not sure what will bring them together. So I think that they are speaking with one voice, but they are trying to flex and see if anything better can come out of this.
And you are confident, given your internal and close knowledge and understanding of how the Iranian decision-making apparatus moves, you are confident that they will ultimately come to Islamabad and sit down across the table with the Americans and start talking?
Okay, so the choice is, if they did not do that, then what's the option? The option is that the United States and Israel will continue destroying a large part of Iranian infrastructure. Whether they will go to power stations or water plants, I don't know, because the whole definition of going to the infrastructure may constitute war crimes. I'm not a legal expert, but there are views on either side. But naturally, there will be massive, massive destruction and loss of life and misery for these people who are already suffering huge hardship because of the sanctions. So if prevail, then let's get a deal done. Okay. Now, the important thing to note here, which is missed by most people, is that President Trump's time in office is another 2 years and 9 months, or whatever the 8 months. Okay. So after he leaves, then you have another administration that is in charge. So just as President Trump said, he doesn't want to be bound by the actions of Presidents Obama and Biden. He says they did lousy deals. Then naturally the same should apply to him. So why does he want to bind Iranians to 20 years when he himself is only there for another 2.5? And his successors may or may not agree, based on the state of the world at that time, or whether this was a good deal or a bad deal. So if I were the Iranians, I would say we are happy to stop our enrichment as long as you remain president. And that's a big win for you, because you can say that during the term of your presidency, Iran did not enrich uranium and proceed to building a bomb.
So, that is one of the arguments that they may have put forward. But hopefully, as you're also saying, that they do come to Islamabad and talks do start, and there is some sort of a framework which has been negotiated to a large extent, and that is actually agreed upon and signed. You feel that that agreement would enable both Iran and the US to spin their own narratives and convince their own people that they've got a good deal?
I think that, look, it's in the United States, the MAGA movement largely, and large parts of the United States have put their trust and faith in President Trump. If he says that I am the president that stopped Iran from developing a bomb, I am the president that stopped Iran from enriching uranium, I am the president that put some brakes on Iran's ability to use their missiles to attack Israel, hey, look, I am the hero, people will generally not question that as much. In Iran, there will be far more questions to say that after all the death and destruction, why are we still playing second fiddle to them after what they've done? They've shown no remorse, and they continue to bind us more and more. So I think the question in Iran will be, okay, let's do the deal, but then who is going to pay for all the damage and destruction that has been caused in Iran? This to them is as big a question as getting a deal done. And then into that is the question, will sanctions be lifted? So if the US decide to lift sanctions, allow Iran to sell oil in the open market at open market prices, then the question of compensation, which is still valid, becomes a little bit more nuanced. Okay? And if not, then they should be permitted to say, charge a fee, share it with Oman, because both of you control the straits, and charge a fee and use the money from that fee to pay for your rebuild and reconstruction, because we ain't going to compensate you.
I think that will probably be one of the key demands that the Iranians will put forward. Mr. Mersi, finally,
Sure.
we've also in Pakistan, we've invested so much into our
Of course.
mediation. It's been many weeks, and as you very correctly said that we've done far more than I think most people imagined that we could, and we are now the sole mediators, and I think probably the only country that is trusted equally by the Americans, by the Iranians, by the Saudis, by the Chinese. It's a unique position that we've had, and we are actually
Absolutely.
genuinely trying our best to make it happen.
So I
How do
think
you look at Pakistan's role now and in the days and months forward whenever this conflict comes to an end, which it will inshallah come to an end? How do you see this
so.
episode continuing
My
in terms of
advice,
Pakistan's role?
yeah, my advice to Pakistan today would be um, two things. One is try and get a further extension to the ceasefire. Not that it's strictly needed, and if there is no trust, yes, it's needed. If there is trust between the parties, it will make no difference. Okay, so try and get a 3 to 7 day extension to the ceasefire to calm things down. Number one, that should be an easy one from both sides, unless there is bad faith on one side or the other. The second thing I would do after that is to try to see what are the 7 key points that should be worked out in the MOU. And even in the MOU, if the MOU is nothing more than an agenda setting MOU, a framework for the 60 days or 90 days they'll have to spend discussing detail, at least they've got on a table now. You remember that when the discussion started, the Iranians came with 10 points and the Americans, or the Iranians 10 points or 15 points, one side, the other side had some other points, okay? So they should take on this and say, at least the MOU, the common ground between the two sides are these 10 points, okay? And agree that this is the framework for the 60-day dialogue. If they can get those two things done, an extension and an agenda agreed for the 60 days of discussions, I think that's a huge win for Pakistan and the world.
And we all hope that actually that is exactly what happens. We are praying and hoping and praying that sanity prevails,
Sure.
and peace can break out right here from Islamabad. Mr. Mohammad Amarsi, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today from London.
It's a pleasure.
We will take a short break, but when we come back, what is happening with the shipping traffic in the Straits of Hormuz after this severe disruption, its impact, and in months ahead, major changes that can happen. We will be joined by an expert to stay with us.